in commercial property, how a tenant can be sticky in your commercial property. If you want to know what is skin in the game that I call all often, then this video is going to help you to understand, and how you can make your tenant sticky is something that you need to understand. So let's dive into it. So let's say you have a vacant property and you want to tenant it out. So you have been talking to multiple prospective tenants, right? And these prospective tenants, based on the terms and condition, you want to leasing it out. Now, how would you make sure that the tenant that you are choosing is actually going to be sticky, or it's somebody who is going to stay for a long term? Okay, here is something to understand. The first thing is what I call fit out cost. Let's say if you have a commercial property which is kind of an empty shell or like a empty shop, and that you want to renting it out, and to give it to another tenant, right? And let's say that tenant is a cafe shop. They want to set it up a cafe and they want to do business there, so they want to lease. The first thing is that what I call is the fit out cost. Because it is an empty shell, in order to make it as a cafe, there is a significant fit out cost, right? That the cafe, the front portion that needs to be changed, where the customer will come and order it, and then the cafe is being produced, and there would be some freezer section, and predominantly like whatever you have seen in a cafe that needs to be built. So that's called fit out cost, and that fit out cost could be 100,000, 150,000. It depends on how big is the cafe and what's the layout, right? So the first thing that you need to understand is that who is going to pay for that fit out cost. Now, if you as a landlord are the desperate of having, like, they must be doing this, then you need to make sure that the fit out cost is been shared, or more importantly, you can pass it on that, okay, tenant has to do the fit out cost. Now, my favorite is always the fit out cost would be paid by the tenant, and for that you might have to reduce the rent a little bit upfront. You might give them the 6 months rent free and whatever way that you can make it work. But if the fit out cost is been paid by the tenant, then what it basically means, that tenant is not going to just stay there for 1 or 2 years and then just going to move out. So why? Because the stickiness becomes more if the fit out cost is paid by the tenant. Now the vice versa, if it is paid by the landlord, then there is a chance that there is not much skin in the game as far as the tenant concerned, because they just think like, okay, I can move out because I did not spend anything upfront, and more importantly, all this fit out cost is paid by the landlord. So in order to make it sticky, make sure that you can pass it on as much as possible on the tenant side, and for that you can give them upfront rent free, but the fit out cost, everything will be paid by the tenant. Now the second point that I would like to talk about is the longer lease. The longer the lease is, the stickier the tenant is. Now think about for a moment, if you get a tenant where, let's say, 5 years lease. Now 5 years is such a long time. Most of your tenants will be thinking that want to establish the business, right? Because you need to continuously pay 5 years rent, and as I said, that 5 years is such a long time that the tenant is not kind of giving you a bluff, or tenant is not like just testing the water. Now if the lease is, let's say, 1 year or 2 years, then you could say it's in, they're just testing the water, because anybody can absorb 1 year rent, right? Because they were, after all, they are in this cafe example, they're doing the business, and they will see, let's see if that cafe works. If it doesn't work, then I'll just move out. So the longer the lease, the better for the landlord, because remember, the tenant is actually vouching for that 5 years lease, and you could give them an options. You could give them kind of hugely incentives initial stage, but having a long lease is better. Sometimes you could go even 7 years lease, 10 years lease. It depends on the tenant wants. At the same time, as a landlord, you need to focus, you need to put forward with your ideas of a longer lease. Remember, longer lease means tenant stickiness, means tenant has skin in the game. Okay, the next point that I will talk about is the strong guarantee. Personal guarantee or a corporate guarantee. Now, what is a guarantee? Guarantee is in the lease. You mention that, okay, if it is a 1 year lease, and if there is a brand new company, and the company is the only one as a tenant, and there is no personal guarantor, tomorrow, guess what? That company, they can just make it bankrupt, and move out, and you can't get past anything from them because that company is the only tenant and the company does not have any money to recoup. On the other side, if you put the company director as a personal guarantor, that gives a lot, because now the company director is saying that, okay, if my business is not able to pay rent, I would pay. I am the personal guarantor. I am personally vouching for this. And that gives a lot of stickiness in the tenancy, because tenant is saying it's not only about my business, about my company. I personally giving it guarantee that I will honor it. I am going to do this. So if it is a longer lease with a personal guarantee, that almost gives you a certainty that tenant has skin in the game, because they are willing to sign a 5 years lease. They are willing to do these things for a long term, and more importantly, they are giving a personal guarantee. But on the other side, if there is no personal guarantee, there is not much skin in the game. There is not much stickiness with the tenant. So as a landlord, you need to make sure that you get those personal guarantee when the lease is being drawn up. And if you are buying a property which is predominantly like a pre-owned and the lease is there, you could opt for it, that if that I want the tenant to be as a personal guarantor, then only I can buy. In return, you can give some of the things. Now lease, remember, once it has been drawn up, it's very difficult to change, but it's not impractical. You can still give some incentives to your tenant, and as a result that they will be the personal guarantor. And from a tenant point of view, if they really want to do business, if they really want to stay there for long term, there is no harm just putting their name in the as a personal guarantor. But in return, if they get something, maybe they are asking for the aircon replacement, and you can do that. Maybe they are asking to upgrade that shop, and you can spend that money, or 50-50, whatever arrangement that you can do. And it's like a win-win situation. It's like a give and take. So the more and more things that you can make it as a win-win situations is better for both tenant as well as the landlord. And remember, if the tenant has a personal guarantee, means tenant has the stickiness, tenant has skin in the game. And the last but not the least is I would talk about is make good clause. What is a make good clause? If tenant has a make good clause in the lease, which basically means that once they move out of this tenancy, or like at the end of the tenancy, they have to do things the way it was been presented. It could be an empty shell. Remember, the fit out that has been put, to remove that fit out, it is going to cost much. And if that cost is been passed into the tenant and saying in the make good clause, then what happens is the tenant will have more stickiness. They can't just move out, because they must have given you a guarantee. They must given you a bond or kind of a bank guarantee. So this guarantee will be then used up for this make good clause. So if it is a strong make good clause in the lease, it's actually good for the landlord point of view, and the tenant has more stickiness. Tenant has more skin in the game. I hope you find this video is helpful, and it gives you an idea about what do I mean by skin in the game, what is tenant stickiness. So if you are writing up a lease, and if your property is vacant and you want to drawing up and you're attracting a tenant, then think about these points. Think about how you can make sure the tenant is sticky in your future tenancy, which is going to help you to make more money, more cash flow, and more importantly, the property will not be vacant for a longer period of time. I hope you find this video is helpful. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.